In a quiet cafe on the edge of town, an officer sat alone, his uniform dusty, his eyes hollow, his world falling apart. His young son had been missing for 48 agonizing hours. He had spent 2 endless days searching for his missing little boy and still found nothing. No witnesses, no clues. Hope was slipping from his fingers like sand. But then, something happened no one in that cafe would ever forget. A little girl no older than 8 walked in with a massive German shepherd at her side. She approached the officer with trembling hands but unshakable confidence in her eyes. "My police dog can find your son," she whispered. The entire room froze. The officer blinked in disbelief. The girl wasn't a canine handler. She wasn't even related to the police, and a dog no one knew. So how did she know? How could a child make such a claim? The dog's eyes locked onto the officer, as if he understood every word. Then he stepped forward, sniffed the missing boy's hoodie, and suddenly growled, body tensing like he had just uncovered a hidden truth. Before Daniel could speak, the girl whispered, "He knows where your son is." And what happened next would shock everyone and expose a truth no one could have imagined. Stay with us, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The diner sat at the edge of a quiet desert highway, the kind of place truckers stopped at for refills and weary travelers used to escape the heat. But tonight, it held only one man who looked more broken than the cracked asphalt outside. Officer Daniel Hayes sat alone in a turquoise booth, his elbows resting on the table, his fingers gripping a small photograph so tightly the edges had begun to curl. A picture of his son, 8 years old, smiling, taken just 3 days before he vanished. Daniel hadn't slept more than an hour since the Amber Alert went out. His uniform, once crisp and well-kept, was now wrinkled, dusty, and stained with the tracks of dried tears he refused to admit were his. He had combed through parks, alleys, back roads, and abandoned lots until his legs shook from exhaustion. Every clue had led nowhere. Every lead had died before sunrise. His coffee sat untouched, his food untouched, his hope hanging by a thin, fraying thread. The waitress, a kind woman who had tried offering comfort earlier, peeked over but didn't approach again. She could see it. Everyone could see it. Daniel wasn't just tired. He was unraveling. He stared at the picture again, whispering the same question he'd whispered 100 times today. "Where are you, buddy?" His voice cracked on the last word. He swallowed hard, trying to force the wave of emotion back down. Officers weren't supposed to break. Fathers weren't supposed to fail. But tonight, he felt like he had done both. Outside, the late afternoon sun was starting to sink, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. The world kept turning, unaware or uncaring of the nightmare swallowing Daniel's life whole. His radio crackled occasionally, but every update was the same. Negative search, no new information, nothing found. Daniel closed his eyes, leaning back against the booth's cushion. The silence inside the diner grew heavy, pressing against him like the weight of the entire world. He tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. He tried to breathe deeply, but his chest felt crushed. He was a trained officer, brave, composed, steady under pressure, but nothing in his years of service had prepared him for the agony of not knowing if his child was alive. And as he sat there, staring blankly at the window, the truth settled over him like a cold shiver. They were running out of time, and he had no idea where to look next. Little did he know, help was already walking toward him. Daniel rubbed a hand across his tired eyes, trying to push back the sting of exhaustion. The diner hummed with the faint sound of an old refrigerator and a soft country song playing from a dusty speaker. Nothing unusual, nothing different. Just another slow, quiet moment in a day that had already broken him. Then, the bell above the diner door jingled. A small, sharp sound, but enough to make Daniel look up. Sunlight poured in from behind the figure, standing in the doorway, casting a long silhouette across the diner floor. At first, Daniel thought it was just another traveler stopping for a late lunch, but as his vision adjusted, he saw her. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. Her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, cheeks flushed like she had been running, and beside her towering, calm, alert stood a massive German shepherd. The dog's ears perked forward. His gaze swept the diner once, then locked directly onto Daniel without hesitation. Not curious, not cautious, focused. Customers turned to look, surprised. It wasn't every day a child walked into a diner with a fully grown working dog like she owned the place. But the girl didn't seem scared or confused. She walked with purpose, determination, almost like she was on a mission. Daniel straightened slightly, unsure what to make of the strange pair. The girl paused a few feet from his booth, gently resting her hand on the dog's neck as if grounding herself. Her small chest rose and fell with hurried breaths, not from fear, but urgency. "You're Officer Hayes, right?" she asked softly. Daniel blinked. "Yes, I am." His voice was rough, worn from hours of desperation. The girl swallowed hard, gathering her courage. "My name is Lily," she said, "and this is Shadow." She glanced down at the German Shepherd, who didn't break eye contact with Daniel for a second. We came to help you." Daniel frowned, confused. "Help me?" His heart tightened. He didn't have the emotional strength for false hope, not from a child. Lily nodded quickly. "Your son is missing." It wasn't a question. It was a certainty. Daniel's breath hitched. "How do you know that?" She placed both hands on Shadow's back, steadying herself before speaking the words that would silence the entire diner. "Because Shadow can find him." The room fell still. Forks paused midair. Conversations died instantly. Even the old refrigerator seemed quieter, as if the world itself had frozen to hear what she would say next. Daniel stared at her, this tiny girl with trembling hands and a giant dog at her side, wondering how she knew and how she could possibly help. He had no idea that his life was about to shift in a direction no one in that diner could have imagined. For a long moment, Daniel didn't speak. He just stared at the little girl standing before him. Small frame, nervous fingers twisting the fabric of her shirt, but eyes filled with a strange kind of certainty. Shadow stood tall beside her, his chest rising steadily, his gaze locked on Daniel like he understood every word that had been spoken. Daniel cleared his throat. "Listen, sweetheart, I appreciate what you're trying to do, really. But this is police work. It's dangerous, and search dogs need special training. Your dog is—" He hesitated, searching for a gentle word. "A pet." Lily's expression didn't crumble the way he expected. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly, determination tightening her jaw. "He's not just a pet," she said quietly. "Shadow was trained by my dad." Daniel blinked. "Your dad?" She nodded. "He was a search and rescue handler." Her voice softened. "Before he passed away." The diner fell even quieter. A couple near the counter exchanged sympathetic glances. Daniel felt a pang of guilt settle in his chest. He had spoken too quickly, too sharply. The girl wasn't playing a game. She wasn't seeking attention. Her sincerity was unmistakable. "I'm sorry," he murmured gently. "I didn't know." Lily gave a tiny shrug, her fingers moving through the fur on Shadow's neck. "It's okay. Most people don't believe me." She looked down at the dog with a small, sad smile. "But Shadow wasn't just trained for fun. My dad taught him everything he knew. Tracking, scent work, finding people who were lost." Daniel rubbed a hand across his face. The logic made sense, but still, asking a child's dog to find his missing son felt like grabbing at smoke. "Sweetheart," he began softly, "even trained dogs can't always." Lily stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. "He can do it." She nodded to herself, gathering strength. "Shadow found me once." Daniel's breath caught. "Found you? When I was taken?" Her voice cracked, barely audible. "My dad wasn't home. I got grabbed outside our apartment. Shadow tracked me down. He saved my life." A hush washed over the room. Even the waitress froze, hand hovering above a coffee pot. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not quite belief, not quite hope, but something he hadn't felt in days. Possibility. Lily met his gaze, her young eyes filled with a maturity she shouldn't have had to earn. "Officer Hayes," she whispered, "Shadow can find your son. You just have to let him try." Shadow's ears twitched, his tail stiffening, waiting. Daniel looked between the girl, the dog, and the photograph of his missing boy. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a coincidence. Maybe this was the miracle he had been begging for. Daniel hesitated, his heart pounding as Lily's words echoed in his mind. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe something, Anything but hope was a dangerous thing after so many dead ends. Still, the fierce conviction in Lily's voice, the unwavering focus in Shadow's eyes, something inside him whispered that he had nothing left to lose. With shaking hands, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the one item he always kept close, his son's small blue hoodie, the last thing his boy had been wearing when he vanished. Daniel swallowed hard and held it out. "This is his," he said quietly. Lily stepped back slightly. "Give it to Shadow." Daniel lowered himself slowly, placing the hoodie on the diner floor in front of the German Shepherd. Shadow sniffed the air once, then lowered his head with an intensity that made the hairs on Daniel's arms stand upright. The dog inhaled deeply, taking in the scent, his nostrils twitching rapidly. Then, Shadow froze. His muscles tightened, his tail stiffened. His ears shot straight up as if he'd heard something no human could. Every instinct inside the dog snapped awake. The entire diner felt it, the shift in the air, the sudden electric tension radiating from him. Lily whispered, "He's picking up the trail." Shadow moved suddenly, swift, deliberate, like a switch inside him had been flipped. He paced in a tight circle, nose skimming the floor, then returned to the hoodie, inhaling again, deeper this time. A soft rumble escaped his chest, not a growl, but a sound of recognition. Daniel's heart hammered. "Is this normal?" Lily nodded. "When he locks onto a scent, he doesn't stop." Shadow lifted his head, his eyes blazing with purpose. Without warning, he lunged toward the diner door, barking sharply. The entire room jumped. "He's found something," Lily breathed. Shadow didn't wait. He scratched at the door, pawing, barking again, commanding the humans to follow. His whole body vibrated with urgency. Daniel rose so quickly his chair scraped loudly across the floor. "Open it," he told the waitress, who hurried to push the door wide. The moment it swung open, Shadow bolted outside, nose to the ground, pulling hard as if an invisible string connected him to something far beyond the parking lot. Lily grabbed Daniel's hand. "Hurry!" Daniel didn't think he ran. For the first time in days, adrenaline surged through his veins, fueled not by fear, but by hope. Shadow had the scent, and he was already leading them into the unknown. Shadow burst out of the diner with a force that startled everyone inside. His paws hit the pavement with purpose, nose glued to the ground as if the scent trail were a glowing line only he could see. Lily sprinted after him without hesitation, her small legs moving fast, determination fueling every step. Daniel chased them, his heart pounding harder than it had during any chase in his career. The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, stretching like dark fingers as they followed the dog onto the deserted street. "Shadow, slow down," Lily called, but the dog didn't slow. He couldn't. Something in the air had ignited him. The scent of the missing boy was fresh enough to ignite every instinct in his body. Daniel radioed in as he ran. "This is Officer Hayes. I'm in active pursuit with a tracking dog. Possible lead on my missing son. Sending location now." His voice shook with mixture of desperation and hope. Shadow weaved through the street, leading them between buildings, across patches of dry grass, then suddenly darting down a narrow alleyway between two warehouses. His growl vibrated through the walls as he picked up speed. Daniel's chest tightened. He's onto something big. They followed the dog into the alley. Trash cans, old crates, scattered debris. Shadow didn't break focus for a second. He moved like a creature possessed, tail rigid, body low, nose to the ground. He sniffed, circled, then suddenly bolted toward an opening on the far side. "Daniel, he's heading for the field," Lily shouted. Beyond the alley, an open lot stretched toward the outskirts of town, dry, dusty, overgrown with tall weeds swaying in the breeze. Shadow tore through it, leaving a trail behind him as he crossed the uneven ground. Backup sirens blared in the distance. Officers were responding to Daniel's call, but Shadow didn't wait. He reached a section of flattened grass and stopped so abruptly that Lily crashed into Daniel, who barely caught her. Shadow sniffed intensely, barking once sharp, commanding. "What is it?" Daniel gasped, knees hitting the dirt. Lily knelt beside the dog. "He's telling us we're still on the right path." Shadow's body vibrated with tension, his nose pressed to a faint tire track barely visible in the fading light. He sniffed it, then barked again, louder this time. Daniel's pulse spiked. Someone was here recently. Shadow darted forward again, pulling them toward the far end of the field. Each step felt heavier, more urgent. The trail grew stronger. Daniel could feel it, the shift in Shadow's body language, the intensity, the desperation. They weren't wandering blind anymore. For the first time since his son went missing, they were closing in. Shadow slowed as he approached the far edge of the open field, his powerful strides shifting into a cautious, deliberate prowl. His nose hovered inches above the dirt, nostrils flaring, chest rising with deep, controlled breaths. Every fiber of his body seemed to tighten. Daniel stopped a few steps behind him, panting, his pulse thundering in his ears. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, afraid to disturb whatever the dog had found. Lily quietly stepped to Daniel's side, her eyes fixed on Shadow. She recognized the change in his stance immediately, his tail stiff, ears forward, body frozen except for his trembling muscles. "He's found something," she breathed. Shadow took a few slow steps, nose tracing an invisible path across the ground. Then he halted in front of an old pile of scrap tires stacked against a rusted metal fence. He sniffed again, short, sharp inhales, and let out a soft, urgent whine. Daniel's breath hitched. Shadow pressed his paw against one of the lower tires, tapping it, then nudged it with his snout. "Move it," Daniel said, voice trembling. Officer Parker, one of the responding backup units, rushed over. Together, Daniel and Parker shoved the top tire aside, dust rising like gray smoke. Another tire rolled free, then another. And there, half buried in the dirt beneath the stack, something small and bright caught Daniel's eye. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. A tiny, grass-stained sock. Blue, with small white stars on it. Daniel's knees gave out before he even realized he was falling. He reached for the sock with trembling hands, lifting it carefully as if it were made of glass. His vision blurred instantly. I know this," he whispered. "This was his. This was my boy's." His voice cracked open on the last word. Lily's expression softened with a painful understanding no child her age should have. "Shadow followed the scent here. This means your son was close." Daniel pressed the sock to his chest, eyes burning. Hope, real, tangible hope, flooded through him like wildfire. "He was here," he murmured. "He was really here." Shadow barked suddenly once, sharply snapping everyone's attention back to him. His head whipped to the left, ears rotating like radar dishes. His body stiffened again, tail raised, nose twitching. "He has another trail," Lily said. Daniel rose to his feet, gripping the sock tightly. "Show us, boy. Please, show us." Shadow sniffed again, spun in a tight circle, then lunged forward with new urgency, faster than before, more certain than ever. The first clue had been found, and Shadow was already chasing the next. Shadow tore across the field with renewed intensity, his body dipping low as he followed the invisible trail that only his instincts could detect. The sun had dipped behind the distant hills, and the sky was beginning to fade into soft amber, brushing the field with long, eerie shadows. Daniel ran after him, gripping the tiny sock in his fist so tightly the fabric pressed into his palm. Lily kept pace beside him, breathless but determined, her eyes glued to Shadow's movements. "Stay close," Daniel called to the officers, spreading out behind them. But Shadow suddenly halted so abruptly that Lily nearly bumped into him. His body stiffened, his ears pricked forward, his lips curled back, revealing a flash of white teeth. A low growl rolled from his chest. Daniel froze. "Shadow, what is it?" The German shepherd took a single step toward the far end of the field, hackles rising like a warning signal. The air felt heavier, thicker, charged with something unseen. Lily whispered, "He senses someone." Before Daniel could respond, Shadow lunged toward a cluster of tall, overgrown weeds swaying unnaturally. The officers flanked him, flashlights raised, hands hovering over their holsters. Then, a sudden rustle. Heavy, fast. Too fast to be an animal. "Someone's there," Officer Parker shouted. A dark figure bolted from the brush, sprinting toward the fence line at the edge of the abandoned tire yard. The officers exploded into motion. "Stop, police," Daniel shouted, adrenaline surging as he took off after the fleeing silhouette. Shadow thundered ahead, barking furiously, his paws kicking up dirt as he closed the distance. The figure stumbled but recovered quickly, vaulting over a low metal barrier like he had done it before, like he knew this place. "Daniel, careful!" Lily cried from behind. The chase cut between rusted machinery, crumbling pallets, and piles of twisted scrap. The fading light made everything more dangerous. The shifting shadows, the jagged edges, the blind corners. Daniel kept his eyes locked on the fleeing man. Who was he? Why run unless... His stomach twisted. Unless he knew something about the missing boy. Shadow's bark sharpened, a warning cutting through the tension. The man glanced back, panicked, and dove toward a break in the fence. Officers scrambled to block him, but he slipped through the narrow gap, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Daniel skidded to a halt. The gap was too small to follow without losing precious time. Shadow stopped beside him, snarling at the hole in the fence, his fur bristling. Lily caught up, breathless. Shadow knew he was watching us. Daniel stared into the darkness, the figure long gone. This wasn't just a missing child case anymore. Someone was out there watching, hiding, and running for a reason. Daniel stood frozen, staring at the narrow gap in the fence where the shadowy figure had vanished. His breath trembled, both from the chase and the crushing realization that the man had been there watching them, hiding, listening. Whoever he was, his presence wasn't a coincidence. Shadow paced aggressively near the fence, nose pumping the air, tail stiff. He barked once sharp, urgent as if warning the darkness that he wasn't afraid to pursue. Daniel placed a hand on the dog's back. Easy boy, we'll find him. But Lily wasn't looking at the fence. She was staring at Shadow, her eyes wide, her expression troubled. The breeze ruffled her hair, and she seemed to wrestle with something inside herself. Daniel noticed instantly. Lily? What is it? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she took a shaky breath and knelt beside Shadow, wrapping her arms around his neck. The dog nudged her gently, sensing her unease. Officer Hayes, she whispered. There's something you should know. Daniel crouched beside her, his heartbeat slowing, fear twisting into anticipation. Tell me. Lily hesitated, lifting her gaze. Shadow doesn't just track scent. He senses things. Fear, lies, danger. My dad always said Shadow could feel what people hide on the inside. Daniel frowned lightly. All dogs sense fear. No, Lily said quickly. Not like this. Her voice cracked with emotion too heavy for a child to carry. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. When I was taken, the words were barely audible. Shadow found me. Even though the man who grabbed me tried to mask the scent, he used gasoline, dirt, everything. But Shadow didn't track my smell. Daniel froze. Then what did he track? She put a trembling hand over her heart. He tracked my fear. Silence swept over the group. Lily continued, her voice small but firm. Shadow knows when someone around us is dangerous. He can feel it. That's why he was so tense in the diner. He wasn't just picking up the scent of your son. He was picking up the fear of someone nearby. Daniel's stomach dropped. The man who ran. Shadow hadn't reacted because of scent alone. He had sensed the fear radiating from the one hiding in the weeds, watching the search unfold. That's why he bolted, Lily whispered. That man was close. Too close. Daniel's hands shook as the truth settled over him. This wasn't a random abduction. Someone was monitoring them, testing how close they were getting. Shadow barked again, snapping them back to the moment. Lily wiped her eyes. Shadow's telling us we don't have much time. Daniel swallowed hard and stood. Then we move. Right now. The hunt had shifted. Shadow wasn't just tracking a trail. He was hunting fear itself. Shadow pulled ahead with a sudden burst of urgency, his paws tearing through the dry weeds as he circled the fence line. Daniel and the officers quickly followed, flashlights sweeping the ground. Night had crept in around them, and the sky glowed with a faint purple tint as the last sunlight faded completely. Lily hurried beside Daniel, her hand gripping the back of his sleeve. He's looking for where the man went, but also where your son might have been taken. Shadow stopped abruptly at a patch of flattened earth behind the fence, an area the grass had been crushed in an uneven, circular pattern. Daniel's flashlight cut across the dirt, revealing tracks. Tire tracks. Deep ones. Fresh. Daniel crouched, examining the grooves. These are recent, maybe hours old. His voice wavered with the weight of possibility and fear. Shadow sniffed the tire impressions intensely, nose brushing the ground, inhaling deeply as if committing every molecule of scent to memory. His tail stiffened, his eyes narrowed, and he let out a sharp, explosive bark. He's found the trail, Lily whispered. Daniel looked at her. You're sure? He only barks like that when he's certain. She knelt next to the dog. Shadow, show us. The German Shepherd didn't hesitate. He moved quickly to the edge of the clearing, where the tracks continued, leading toward a dim dirt road that wound around an old industrial district. The air smelled faintly of oil and rust. Shadow lowered his head again and followed the trail. But this time his movements were slower, more methodical, like he was tracking not just scent, but direction, speed, distance. He's reading the road, Lily explained softly. My dad said dogs can sense how old a trail is by the warmth left behind from tires or footsteps. Shadow's doing that right now. Daniel's heart pounded. Then this vehicle wasn't just here. It left recently. Shadow lifted his head suddenly, sniffing the air with quick, sharp breaths. He turned toward the industrial district, an area filled with old warehouses, loading docks, abandoned factories. Daniel felt dread crawl up his spine. Is he leading us there? Before anyone could answer, Shadow bolted across the dirt road, racing toward the row of silent warehouses like he already knew exactly which one to go to. His bark echoed through the night, a warning, an alert, a command. Lily grabbed Daniel's hand. He's telling us the boy was taken in that direction. Daniel squeezed her hand back, then released it as he began running. Officers followed, weapons drawn, flashlights slicing through the darkness. Shadow didn't slow. The trail was hot, and whatever waited inside those darkened buildings, it was getting closer, much closer. Shadow reached the first warehouse with a force that rattled the rusted metal walls. He skidded to a halt near a massive sliding door, nose pressed against the crack at its base. His growl was low, vibrating through the night air like a warning only the brave would ignore. Daniel slowed behind him, chest heaving. This is it. He's sure. Lily nodded silently, eyes wide, hugging herself as the dark warehouse towered over them like a sleeping giant. The rest of the officers fanned out, weapons drawn, flashlights slicing through the shadows. Officer Parker approached the door. Looks locked from the outside. Haven't seen movement yet. Shadow barked sharply, startling everyone. He pawed the door, muscles coiled, desperate to force his way in. The urgency in him was unmistakable. He didn't want in. He needed in. Daniel felt a coldness spread through him. If my son's inside, we're getting him out, Parker interrupted firmly. Two officers rushed forward with a metal pry bar. The screech of bending steel tore through the silence. Shadow barked louder, pacing in tight circles, every second fueling his agitation. Finally, crack, the lock gave way. Daniel grabbed the door and pulled. It groaned open inch by inch, releasing a breath of stale, cold air tinged with the smell of oil and dust. The interior was swallowed in darkness. Flashlights, Daniel ordered. Beams of light cut across the warehouse, revealing rows of abandoned machinery, stacks of wooden pallets, and long-forgotten crates. Shadows stretched across every corner, making the place feel alive with hidden eyes. But Shadow didn't hesitate. He dashed inside, nose to the concrete floor, tail stiff like a compass needle fixed on a single point. Stay behind him, Daniel called, his own flashlight shaking. Officers followed, steps echoing across the cavernous space. Lily stayed close beside Daniel, her breath trembling. Shadow's reacting differently, she whispered. He knows the scent, but he senses something else. Daniel swallowed. What? Fear, Lily whispered. Shadow suddenly veered left, darting through a narrow corridor lined with metal shelves. Boxes toppled behind him as he forced his way deeper. Daniel's heart hammered louder with each turn. They weren't just following a trail. They were entering someone's hiding place. Shadow skidded to a stop at a rusted doorway at the far end of the warehouse. He growled, pawing at it, nose shoved into the crack beneath it. Daniel raised his flashlight, the beam trembling. Something's behind that door. Lily took a step back. Shadow doesn't want to wait. Daniel placed a hand on the handle, breath shaking. Whatever was behind that door was waiting for them, and Shadow was ready to face it head on. Shadow's growl deepened, echoing through the narrow corridor as he pawed harder at the rusted metal door. His nails scraped the surface in frantic strokes, not random, not panicked, but urgent, targeted. He knew something was behind it, something important, something alive. Daniel stepped forward, hand trembling on the doorknob. The handles jammed. Officer Parker pulled his flashlight closer, scanning the edges. This door hasn't been opened in years. It's welded shut on one side. Shadow barked sharply, refusing to move away from the crack along the floor. His nose shoved against it again, inhaling with short, fevered breaths. His tail was rigid, locked, as though bracing himself for whatever was inside. Lily whispered, "He's picking up the scent. The fear. It's stronger here." Daniel's throat tightened. "Is my son?" Shadow barked again, louder, desperate. "Get this door open," Daniel barked, voice breaking. Officer Parker and two others stepped forward, crowbars ready. Metal groaned under their force, flakes of rust raining to the ground. The entire door shuddered with each strike, sending vibrations through the concrete floor. Shadow paced in circles back, forth, back again, until suddenly he stopped dead still and stared at the lower right corner of the doorway. His body stiffened, his nose pressed flat against the wall. Lily's eyes widened. "He smells something else too." "What?" Daniel asked, breath shallow. Before she could answer, the metal screamed. Clang, crack. The door finally gave way, swinging open just enough for a flashlight beam to slip inside. Daniel stepped forward, chest tight. Lights in. Flashlights flooded the narrow room behind the door, a space barely large enough to stand in. Dust coated the walls in thick layers. Old machinery parts lay scattered on the floor. But something else caught Daniel's attention instantly. A false wall. A wooden panel wedged unevenly on the backside. Fresh nail marks. Scratches. A faint, smeared fingerprint. "Move that panel," Daniel commanded. Shadow lunged first, teeth gripping the corner of the board. Officers rushed to help, pulling until the wood splintered apart. Behind it, a hidden compartment, a space someone had intentionally concealed. Daniel's breath hitched as he shined his flashlight inside. A torn piece of fabric, a small plastic water bottle, a toy car, blue, with a broken wheel. Daniel's heart shattered. "That's my son's." Lily clasped her hands over her mouth. He was here. Shadow pushed into the compartment, sniffing wildly, pacing the tiny space with sharp, anxious breaths. He whined a deep, trembling sound. Daniel realized what the dog was telling them. They had been close. So close. But someone had moved the boy recently. Shadow suddenly spun toward the exit of the warehouse, barking fiercely. The trail wasn't cold. It was moving, and whoever took the boy was still out there. Shadow burst out of the hidden compartment with explosive urgency, his claws skidding across the warehouse floor as he dashed toward the exit. His body moved with the frantic certainty of a creature who knew with every instinct that time was slipping through their fingers. "Shadow, wait!" Lily cried, sprinting after him. Daniel followed close, heart pounding so violently he could hardly breathe. He glanced back once at the hidden room, the tiny, claustrophobic space where his son had been kept. The discarded toy car, the torn fabric, the proof of how close they were. But Shadow was already racing ahead, nose glued to the ground, muscles coiled like springs. Lily spoke breathlessly as she ran. "He's picked up a fresher scent. The kidnapper must have left just before we arrived." Daniel winced. The thought burned like fire in his chest. Minutes, maybe even seconds, had separated him from his son. Shadow darted out a side door and into the cold night. The temperature had dropped, leaving a thin layer of fog swirling across the dirt path behind the warehouse. Flashlights cut through the haze as officers fanned out, trying to keep up with the dog's blistering pace. "He's moving faster," Officer Parker called. "Trail's hot." Shadow reached the tree line at the back of the industrial lot. Beyond it stretched a dense patch of woods, dark, tangled, unforgiving. The kind of place someone could hide a child without being seen. Daniel felt his breath catch. "Lily, can he track through woods?" Lily didn't hesitate. "He can track anywhere." Shadow barked once sharp, commanding, and plunged into the tree line. Branches whipped past him as he weaved through the undergrowth. Daniel forced himself after the dog, pushing through thorns and branches, the forest swallowing them alive. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. The air thickened with damp earth and decaying leaves. Even the officers behind them lowered their voices, as if afraid to disturb whatever waited ahead. Shadow suddenly stopped. Not slowly, not cautiously. He froze mid-step, nose in the air, ears turning like radar dishes. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. Lily swallowed hard. "He smells something. something close. Shadow inhaled again, deeper this time, and let out a low, trembling whine, one that made Daniel's skin crawl. The dog turned his head toward a faint, winding trail that cut deeper into the woods, barely visible under the moonlight. Daniel felt something shift in the air. A heaviness. A warning. Lily whispered, "He's not just tracking scent anymore." Daniel looked down at Shadow. "He's tracking fear again." Shadow took one slow step forward, then another, and suddenly, he bolted, faster than before, more desperate than ever. They weren't close. They were minutes away. And whatever lay at the end of that trail, their entire world depended on reaching it in time. Shadow tore through the woods like a creature locked onto destiny itself. His paws hammered against the forest floor, scattering leaves and twigs as he followed the invisible thread pulling him forward. Daniel forced his legs to keep up, lungs burning, heart thundering in a rhythm that matched the fear pounding inside him. "Shadow, slow down," Lily called, but even she knew he wouldn't. Not now. Not when the scent was this fresh. Not when fear lay so thick in the air it felt suffocating. The forest grew denser, branches snagging at Daniel's uniform, roots threatening to trip him. The moon peeked through the canopy in thin silver streaks, lighting their frantic path. Officers trailed behind, flashlights bouncing wildly, the tension stretching tighter with every passing second. Shadow suddenly skidded to a halt. So abruptly, Daniel nearly collided with him. The dog froze, body stiff, breath trembling, ears pinned forward. His nose twitched rapidly, and he let out a faint whine, a sound Daniel had never heard from him before. Lily whispered, "He's found something. Something big." Shadow took one slow step toward a cluster of thick bushes, the leaves trembling with the dog's heavy breaths. Daniel's heart squeezed painfully. His hands shook as he lifted his flashlight. "Please," he whispered to himself. "Please, God." Shadow pushed forward, nose slipping through the brush. Then he lunged, scratching, digging, shoving aside branches with desperate urgency. Daniel dropped to his knees, ripping the bushes apart with trembling hands. Dirt scraped under his nails. Branches snapped beneath his grip. And then, he heard it, a sound so faint it nearly drowned in the night air. A small, soft cry. Daniel froze. His breath vanished. The world narrowed into a single point. "Daddy?" The voice was weak, broken, trembling. Daniel's entire body shattered. He tore through the last layer of brush and saw him, his son, curled inside an old, partially buried storm shelter. His little face streaked with dirt, his eyes red and swollen, his small body trembling from fear and exhaustion. "Buddy," Daniel gasped, voice cracking apart. The boy's eyes widened, and then he sobbed. "Daddy." Daniel reached in, pulling him into his arms, holding him so tightly he feared he might break him. Tears streamed freely down his face, mixing with dirt and relief. Shadow whimpered beside them, nudging the boy gently, licking his cheek as if apologizing for every second he'd been gone. Lily knelt nearby, tears glistening in her eyes. He found him. Daniel held his son close, burying his face in the little boy's hair. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I've got you. Daddy's got you." For the first time in days, for the first time since the nightmare began, Daniel could breathe. Shadow had done the impossible. He had brought a family back together. Daniel clutched his son tightly, refusing to loosen his grip even for a second. Officers radioed urgently, voices sharp with adrenaline as they called for medical support. Shadow stayed close, circling father and son like a guardian who had finally completed his mission. But even in his quiet protectiveness, something in the dog's demeanor had changed. His ears twitched. His nose lifted. A low growl rippled through his throat. Lily noticed it first. "Shadow senses something? Someone's close." Daniel stiffened. "The kidnapper." The words barely left his mouth when Shadow spun toward the darkness behind them, teeth bared, barking with ferocity that shook the trees. Officers swung their flashlights, beams cutting into the thick forest. Then, a branch snapped. Heavy footsteps. A silhouette. The kidnapper attempted to flee again, sprinting between the trees with frantic desperation. He hadn't expected the officers to find the shelter. He hadn't expected Shadow to track the boy so quickly. Panic made him clumsy. "Stop! Police!" Officer Parker roared as he and two officers tore after him. But Shadow was faster. The German shepherd lunged forward like a bolt of lightning, weaving through trees, dodging branches, gaining ground with terrifying speed. Daniel held his son tightly as he watched, unable to move, breath caught in his throat. The kidnapper looked back just once, just enough to see the glowing eyes and snarling face of the dog closing in. He tripped. Shadow pounced. Not violently trained, controlled, precise. He pinned the man's arm to the ground, growling mere inches from his face. The kidnapper froze, trembling, unable to fight the weight and fury of the animal above him. Officers closed in instantly, handcuffs snapping around the man's wrists. Daniel, still holding his son, approached slowly. His hands shook not from fear but from rage barely contained. Officer Parker wrenched the man up. Why? Why take a child? The kidnapper spit out dirt, eyes wild. He was alone. Easy. I've done it before. His voice cracked into a sickening smirk. I knew the area, knew the patterns. I wasn't supposed to get caught. Daniel's stomach twisted. You nearly destroyed a family. The kidnapper sneered. Would have worked, if not for that dog. Shadow growled again, deeper this time, as if warning him not to speak another word. Lily stepped forward, voice trembling with strength far beyond her years. Shadow didn't just track you, he felt your fear. The officers exchanged glances. None of them doubted her. Not after what they had witnessed. The kidnapper was dragged away, fighting, shouting, but no one cared. His power was gone. Daniel held his son close, tears of relief soaking into the boy's hair. They were safe, because of a little girl and her extraordinary dog. But the night wasn't finished with them yet. The forest had gone strangely quiet after the arrest. No more frantic footsteps, no more shouting, no more fear slicing through the night. Instead, a deep, almost sacred stillness settled over the trees as officers escorted the kidnapper away. Flashlights dimmed, radios lowered. The chaos finally began to fade. Daniel knelt on the cold ground, cradling his son like he was afraid the boy might disappear the moment he let go. The child trembled against him, small hands clinging desperately to his father's uniform. You're safe, buddy, Daniel whispered, voice cracking. I've got you now. I'm here. His son buried his face into Daniel's chest, sobbing softly. Daddy, Shadow found me. Daniel swallowed hard, tears burning his eyes. Yeah, he whispered, brushing the boy's hair. Shadow saved you. Just a few steps away, Shadow sat proudly yet quietly, chest rising and falling with tired breaths, his fur matted with dirt and leaves. But his eyes never left the boy, not once. It was as if he refused to blink until he knew the child was truly out of danger. Lily approached slowly, her small hands clasped together. She hesitated, unsure if she was interrupting, until Shadow nudged her gently with his nose. She let out a shaky laugh and wrapped her arms around his neck. Daniel looked up at her, voice thick with gratitude. Lily, you and Shadow, you saved my son's life. His voice broke. I can never repay you. Lily shook her head. You don't have to. She glanced at Shadow, eyes shining. Shadow wanted to help. He knew your son was scared. He felt it. Daniel's son reached out with small, trembling fingers. Can I pet him? Lily nodded, stepping aside. The boy touched Shadow's fur, and the dog leaned in gently, letting out a soft, comforting whimper. It was as though he understood the child's fear, the trauma, and the relief all at once. Daniel watched through tears he couldn't hold back. Sirens made their way down the forest path. Paramedics lifted the boy carefully, wrapping him in a warm blanket. The child reached toward Shadow as they carried him away. Thank you, Shadow, he whispered. Shadow tilted his head, ears flicking, as if receiving the message directly into his heart. As the ambulance doors closed, Daniel stood beside Lily and Shadow. He placed a hand on the dog's head, voice trembling. You didn't just find my son, he said softly. You brought him back to me. Lily smiled, tears glistening. He always finds the ones who are lost. Shadow let out a quiet, proud bark. And in that moment, beneath the dark canopy of trees, with the nightmare finally behind them, everyone understood. A little girl's faith, a frightened boy's courage, and a dog's extraordinary gift had changed everything. Shadow wasn't just a hero. He was hope.